I'm about to tell you a story that will churn the stomach of any person with a trace of human decency. For 10 years of my life, the human being I cherished most in this world, the one I raised with every ounce of my love, the one I brought into this world through both pain and joy, that very person violated me. Every single day, while I lay paralyzed, unable to even lift my left arm to shield myself. My own son, my Leo, defiled me for an entire decade. And the most sickening part, he did it all while pretending to care for me. It sounds like the plot of a horror film, but this happened right here in Savannah, Georgia, inside my own house, under the very roof where I raised him, believing I was shaping him into a good man. My name is Adelaide Thorne. I'm 72 years old, and I still live here in Savannah. People who see me today, selling my medicinal herbs at the Forsyth Farmers Market, from my little shop filled with healing plants, chatting with people, offering advice on teas and remedies. They could never imagine the hell I endured. They know me as Miss Addie of the Herbs, that lady who always has a smile on her face and a comforting word for those in pain. But behind this smile lies a story I kept buried for a long, long time, until I decided I could no longer remain silent. Before I delve deeper into this difficult story, tell me your name in the comments and where you're listening from. I want to know who you brave souls are, those with the courage to hear the unvarnished truth of life. Because the story I'm about to tell isn't for everyone. It's a story that will affect you in ways you might not anticipate. But I must tell it because I know there are other women out there suffering what I suffered. And maybe, just maybe, my courage can lend them some of their own. Every word I'm about to speak is true. Every detail happened, and if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why it took me so long to find the strength to speak about it. My life wasn't always about plants and natural remedies. I worked in a textile factory here in Savannah, sewing all day, earning my keep to raise my son, Leo, on my own. The factory was in the industrial district, a massive, noisy building where hundreds of women spent their days hunched over sewing machines, creating clothes we could never dream of affording for ourselves. Leo's father left me the moment he found out I was pregnant. He said he wasn't ready for responsibility, that he was too young to be a father. He was a handsome boy from a good family who had filled my head with promises and vanished the instant things got real. I was only 19 when Leo was born, but I resolved to raise that boy with an abundance of love and give him everything I never had. My own mother had died when I was small, and my father was a hard man, incapable of showing affection. I swore to myself that my son would be different, that he would grow up secure in the knowledge that he was loved, that he would have every opportunity I was denied. Looking back, I think it was precisely this overwhelming love that spoiled him, that made him believe he could do anything he wanted with me. I worked like a woman possessed for over 20 years in that factory. I'd wake at 5 a.m., make breakfast, leave lunch for Leo to heat up after school, and take 2 buses to get to work before 7. The factory was a hot, stuffy place, thick with fabric dust and chemical fumes. I spent the entire day hunched over a sewing machine, performing the same motion thousands of times. It was work that broke my back, strained my eyes, and left my fingers stiff from guiding the fabric. I'd return home at 6 in the evening, bone-tired, but I still had to cook dinner, help Leo with his homework, do the laundry, clean the house, and prep everything for the next day. It was a soul-crushing routine, but I endured it all for my son's future. On weekends, when I wasn't washing clothes or cleaning, I'd take him to the park, buy him ice cream. I tried to give him the childhood I never had. I saved every penny I could to buy him school supplies, nice clothes, and new shoes whenever his feet grew. Leo was an affectionate boy. At least, that's what I believed back then. He helped around the house, swept the yard, took out the trash. He told me he loved me, said that when he grew up, he would take care of me. Those words gave me the strength to keep going, to work hard every single day. I dreamed of the day he'd graduate, get a good job, and we could finally have a more peaceful life. It never once crossed my mind that inside that boy I was raising with so much sacrifice, a monster was taking root, that all the love I showered on him was being twisted into something sick. In school, Leo was always an average student. He wasn't at the top of his class, but he never caused any trouble. He was quiet, obedient, and did his assignments without complaint. I attended every parent-teacher conference, spoke with his teachers, and always heard the same thing. He was a polite, respectful boy. No one ever had a single complaint about him. He never had behavioral issues. So, I was at ease, convinced I was raising him right, that I was on the correct path. When he turned 18, I started to notice odd changes in his behavior. First, it was the way he looked at me. He would stare, but differently, especially if I was changing clothes or coming out of the shower. They were lingering gazes that made me deeply uncomfortable, but I tried to brush them off. Sometimes I felt like someone was watching me in my bedroom or the bathroom. But when I'd check, he'd be far away, watching TV or on his phone. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was just paranoid from overwork. He also became more clingy, more affectionate, in a way that felt unnatural for a mother and her adult son. He wanted to hug me constantly. He'd give me kisses on the cheek that lasted just a bit too long. He was always finding excuses to lean against me, to touch me. When I was in the kitchen cooking, he'd come up from behind and hug me, pressing his body against mine in a way that sent a shiver of unease down my spine. When I'd complain, he'd laugh and say he was just being affectionate, asking if he couldn't even hug his own mother. Once, he offered to give me a massage, saying I looked exhausted from work. I agreed, thinking it was a sweet gesture from a loving son. But the massage was strange. His hands started on my shoulders, as they should, but then they drifted down my back, to my sides, getting alarmingly close to my breasts. When I told him it wasn't right, he just laughed and said I was exaggerating, that he was only trying to relieve my tension, that I was seeing malice where there was none. Things deteriorated so subtly that it took me a while to grasp what was happening. He started entering my room without knocking, always with some flimsy excuse. He needed to ask about school, or he was looking for something he'd lent me, or he just wanted to talk about work. But I noticed his eyes were always fixed on my body in a way that was not normal between a mother and son. If I was in my nightgown, he would linger, talking about anything just to keep looking. When I confronted him about his strange behavior, he would get angry, accusing me of having a dirty mind. He insisted he just wanted to talk, that I was misinterpreting everything. He said I was becoming paranoid, that it was just the exhaustion from work talking, and that I needed more rest. He made me feel guilty for being suspicious, for seeing evil where he claimed there was only care. One night, he came home slightly drunk and tried to sleep in my bed. He claimed he was scared, that he'd had a terrible nightmare and couldn't be alone. I let him, thinking it was a one-time thing, that he'd be back in his own room the next day. But during the night, I felt him moving strangely, pressing his body against mine, his hand creeping to my waist, my leg. When I jolted awake and asked what he was doing, he feigned deep sleep. The next morning at breakfast when I brought it up, he denied it completely. He said I must have dreamt it, that none of it happened, that I was confusing dreams with reality. He said it was common for overworked people to have vivid nightmares, and that I needed to take better care of myself. He made me doubt my own mind, my own perception of what had transpired. I started to become afraid of my own son, yet at the same time, I felt a crushing guilt for thinking such horrible things about him. After all, he was my boy, the son I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. How could I suspect something so monstrous? How could I imagine my own son was having impure thoughts about me? I tried to convince myself I was imagining it all, that the grueling work was making me crazy, that I needed to stop seeing evil where it didn't exist. I began to avoid being alone with him in the house. I always found something to do when he was near. I started locking my bedroom door, something I had never done before. I changed my routine, getting dressed inside the bathroom instead of my room. But all of this just heightened my anxiety, because I couldn't understand why I was taking these precautions against my own child. And then came the day that changed my life forever, the day that split my existence into a before and an after. It was a Monday morning, March 15th, 1998. The day began like any other. I woke up at 5 a.m., as usual, made breakfast, packed my lunch, and got ready for work. Leo was still asleep when I left. It was a warm summer day, but a pleasant breeze made the morning feel fresh. I arrived at the factory at the usual time, clocked in, sat at my sewing machine, and began my work. I was finishing a batch of women's dresses that needed to be delivered before noon. I remember I was focused on my work, trying to meet the deadline, when a horrific pain suddenly exploded in my head, as if someone had struck me on the back of the neck with a hammer. The pain was so intense, my vision went black. I felt the floor spin beneath my feet, a nauseating sensation of the world turning upside down. I tried to grab onto the machine table, but I had no strength. The last thing I remember is sliding from my chair, hearing the other machines grind to a halt, the shouts of women running toward me. After that, complete darkness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, tethered to a host of machines. The doctor explained that I had had a stroke, a cerebral hemorrhage. He said I was very young for something like this, that it usually happened to older people, but that the immense stress of my work and life had likely been a major contributor. The entire left side of my body was numb. I couldn't properly move my left arm or my left leg. That's when my life descended into a living hell. I needed help for everything: to bathe, to dress, to use the toilet, to eat. Leo, who was 22 at the time, offered to take care of me. He said he would give up everything, that he would dedicate his life to caring for me just as I had dedicated my life to him. At that moment, I was deeply moved by his devotion. The first few days at home felt normal. He helped me diligently, took me to the bathroom, fed me, and bathed me. I felt grateful to have such a caring son. But then, the changes began. First, he insisted that no one else could care for me, because only he knew how to do it right. He dismissed the woman the social worker had arranged to help me a few hours a day. Martha was a kind lady in her 50s, who came 3 times a week to bathe me and do some basic physical therapy. She had experience with stroke patients, knew how to handle paralysis, and was gentle and respectful. But Leo started finding fault with everything she did. He claimed she was careless, that she didn't do things correctly, that she was hurting me during the exercises. He manufactured so many complaints that the poor woman eventually quit. After she was gone, he started saying I was very dirty, that I needed longer baths, that he had to be the one to clean me because no one else would do it with the necessary thoroughness. The baths, which had taken 10 minutes with Martha, now stretched to over an hour with him. He claimed that a paralyzed person accumulates dirt in places most people can't imagine, and that without proper cleaning, it could lead to a deadly infection. His hands began to linger on certain parts of my body, especially my breasts and my private areas, always with the excuse of deep cleaning. When I complained that it wasn't right, that it didn't need to take so long, he would say that this was how it had to be, that people who couldn't move needed more careful cleaning, and that I didn't understand anything about medical care. He claimed he had researched hygiene for bedridden patients online, and that specialized sites recommended this kind of meticulous cleaning. He told me I should be grateful he had the patience to do it. I tried to argue, but he always had a ready answer, always a medical justification for every disgusting thing he did. I started to realize something was profoundly wrong when his touches became things that had nothing to do with hygiene. They were lingering touches that filled me with a sickening mix of disgust and terror. He would run his hand over my breasts in circular motions, claiming he was checking for nodules, saying that paralyzed women have a higher risk of cancer due to poor circulation. He touched my intimate area with his fingers, inserting them where they shouldn't be, always claiming he was cleaning out secretions or checking for infection. But there I was, completely dependent on him, unable to even get out of bed on my own. What could I do? My left side was completely unresponsive. I couldn't even push him away with my right hand. I had no strength. It was like being trapped inside my own body, seeing and feeling everything happening to me, but unable to react. The helplessness was maddening. It sent me into a panic. But screaming was useless. There was no one to hear. The situation steadily worsened, so gradually that it made me question if I was losing my mind. He began to control every aspect of my life, The visitors I could have, the medications I took, the food I ate, the shows I watched on television. He insisted it was all for my own good, that he knew what I needed better than anyone, and that as my primary caregiver, he was responsible for all decisions regarding my health and well-being. He isolated us from the world completely. He wouldn't even let the neighbors in to see me. When someone came to the door, he'd answer and say I was sleeping, or in pain, or that the doctor had ordered absolute rest. He always had a different excuse to keep people away. In time, everyone stopped coming, believing I truly needed isolation to recover. After I left the hospital, my true nightmare began. What I had mistaken for the care of a devoted son transformed into the most repulsive ordeal a mother could ever endure. It was as if he had been waiting for this opportunity for years, as if my paralysis was exactly what he had wanted. In those first weeks at home, while I was still adjusting to my new reality, he said he needed to examine me daily for bed sores. He claimed to have researched it online, showing me horrifying printed photos of infected sores, warning that the same could happen to me if I wasn't cared for properly. I believed him. He was my son, the only person I had in the world. Why would I doubt him? He seemed so concerned, so dedicated, speaking with such authority about the medical risks. But these examinations grew longer and longer, and his hands started to wander to places that had nothing to do with preventing sores. He would inspect every inch of my body, claiming he had to check everywhere. He started saying my breasts looked different, swollen, and that he needed to massage them to improve circulation, citing things he'd supposedly read on medical websites. His hands would stay there for a long time, squeezing and kneading, leaving me with a horrible, churning feeling in my stomach, a mix of disgust, fear, and confusion. When I told him it hurt or that I didn't like it, he'd say it was normal to feel discomfort at first, but that my body would get used to it. He'd accuse me of being selfish, reminding me that he was sacrificing his time to care for me, and that I had to cooperate if I wanted to get better. He said it with such conviction that it made me doubt myself. The first true violation, the one that marked the start of the more severe abuse, happened during a bath on a Thursday afternoon. He said I was very dirty down there, and that he needed to clean me thoroughly, or I'd get a urinary infection that could kill me. He started touching me in a way that had nothing to do with cleaning, inserting his fingers where they didn't belong, claiming he was removing buildup. I tried to close my legs, using all the strength in my right side to protect myself, but he held me firmly. "Mom, relax," he said in that falsely gentle voice. "I'm your son. There's nothing wrong with this. You gave me baths my whole life. You cleaned my bottom. You taught me about hygiene. Now it's my turn to take care of you." The comparison was grotesque, but he said it with such naturalness that it made me question if I was the one who was overreacting. From that day on, the baths became sessions of pure torture. I knew they would happen every day, and I couldn't stop them. He'd spend over an hour cleaning me, always with those disgusting excuses. And I was there, trapped, unable to move, resist, or escape. The feeling of despair is indescribable. Then came the medicinal touches. He claimed he had to massage my abdomen daily so my intestines would work properly, warning of fatal blockages. But his messages always started on my belly and drifted down to places that had nothing to do with my bowels. When I'd complain, he'd get angry. "Mom, do you want to get better or not? Do you want to die from an infection? I'm here trying to save you, and you just keep complaining." The psychological manipulation was the worst part, even more so than the physical abuse. He repeated the same phrases every day, a mantra that broke me from the inside out. "Mom, you depend on me for everything. If I'm not here, who will take care of you? Who will feed you, bathe you, give you your medicine? Who will have patience with a cripple?" He said this while touching me, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, as if I should be grateful. He convinced me I was a burden to anyone else, that only he could tolerate me, that if he left, I'd rot in some horrible nursing home. He painted such a terrifying picture that I was petrified of being without him, even as I knew what he was doing was wrong. It was a sick cycle of dependency and fear. When I tried to resist more forcefully, He would issue subtle but effective threats in a calm, controlled voice. Mom, who's going to believe a paralytic over me? Everyone in this neighborhood, in this whole city, knows me as the devoted son who gave up his life for his sick mother. If you start telling lies about me, they'll just think the stroke made you crazy. His words cut like a knife because I knew he was right. He controlled everything. He cut me off from the world. When Mrs. Gable from next door came by, he'd say I was sleeping or that visits made me agitated. He told everyone I was too frail for company. Soon, no one came by at all. The threats became more direct. He said if I told anyone, he'd have me committed to a nursing home, claiming I had stroke-induced dementia. He said he knew people who worked in those places and that I'd be left to rot, mistreated by strangers. Then came the day he decided to take care of my intimate needs. He said I'd been without relaxation for too long, and it was bad for my health, especially as a paralyzed woman. He claimed to have researched special exercises for women in my condition. When I realized what he meant to do, I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth. No one will hear you, Mom. And if they do, they'll just think you're screaming from the pain of your paralysis. From that day on, my life was a scheduled hell. Morning brought the bath with its vile touches. The afternoon brought his invented physical therapy. The night brought the special care that left me in a state of shock. He did it all under the guise of health and medicine, as if he were doing me a favor. He'd say, Mom, I do this because I love you, because you are the most important woman in my life. He mixed declarations of love with his disgusting acts. I couldn't comprehend it. He also started giving me pills that weren't prescribed by my doctor. Special vitamins, he called them, but I know they were meant to make me drowsy and compliant. The first full sexual violation happened on a night I can never erase. He came to my room after midnight, drunk and crying, complaining that he couldn't get a girlfriend because he spent all his time caring for me. He said I had an obligation to help him, that it was my fault he was alone. What happened next is so horrible that I still wake up screaming from nightmares. Afterward, he told me we now had a special relationship, that I was more than a mother to him, that we were a couple. His madness had no bounds. Answer me this honestly. Do you think a mother is obligated to forgive her son, no matter what he does? Tell me in the comments, because what you're about to hear about the years that followed will explain my own controversial opinion on the matter. What began on that cursed night became a routine of horror that stretched on for years. Every dawn brought another day of torment, another day I prayed for God to take me from my suffering. Leo had turned my life into a prison, and he was the cruelest jailer imaginable. Every day, without fail, he repeated his abuses under the guise of care. During the day, it was the checkups, the baths, the physical therapy. Each was just an excuse to touch me, to use my body as if it were a doll. At night, the worst of it happened. I tried to feign sleep, but he'd whisper, "No use pretending, Mom. I know when you're awake." I tried to get help in any way I could. If a neighbor walked past the window, I'd try to signal with my eyes, to move my head in desperation. But he was always there. If he noticed, he'd come close and say loudly, "Mom's in a bit of pain today, isn't she?" But I already gave her the medicine. He screened every phone call, telling people I was too weak to talk. Once I managed to get the phone and dial 911, but my speech was slurred from the drugs he gave me, and the operator couldn't understand. When he found me with the phone, he was furious, threatening to tie me to the bed and tell everyone I was having psychotic episodes. The years bled together. I lost all hope. He had crafted a perfect public image as the dedicated son. Neighbors praised him as an example. Even at my doctor's appointments, he was there, answering for me, never letting me be alone with the physician. He'd say, "Doctor, she gets a bit confused sometimes because of the stroke, but I keep notes on everything." The doctors praised his devotion. Then one day, after nearly 8 years of this hell, something changed. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was homesick from work. That afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. As he was abusing me, I screamed with a force I didn't know I possessed. I screamed for help until my voice gave out. Mrs. Gable heard it through the thin wall separating our houses. She later said she'd never heard such a desperate sound. Worried, she came and knocked on our door. Leo answered, calm as ever, claiming I was just having a pain crisis. But Mrs. Gable wasn't convinced. She insisted on seeing me, pushed past him, and found me in bed, sweating, with marks on my neck and my eyes red from crying. She knew instantly something was terribly wrong. She didn't listen to his excuses and called 911. While we waited, she held my hand, and I tried to mouth the word, help, with my eyes. At the hospital, the doctor on duty grew suspicious. He noted signs of extreme stress and insisted on examining me alone. It was the first time in 8 years I was alone with someone who could help me. When the doctor asked if someone was hurting me, I couldn't speak, but I managed to nod. When he asked if it was my son, I nodded again. The doctor called a social worker and a psychologist. Slowly, I told them everything I could. They were horrified, but they believed me. When they confronted Leo, he denied it all with chilling coldness, claiming I was delusional from the stroke. But the social worker insisted on a full forensic examination. I know this story is heavy, but I bet many of you won't have the courage to hit the like button on this video. Go on, prove me wrong. Let's see if you have the courage, because what you're about to find out happened next will shock you even more. The forensic exam confirmed everything. The doctor found clear, undeniable evidence of both recent and old sexual abuse. The mask had fallen. When confronted with the proof, Leo could no longer maintain his act. The police were called, and he was arrested right there in the hospital, shouting that I was crazy and ungrateful. I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. I was terrified of being sent to a nursing home. Then, a miracle. My cousin Clara, a distant relative I hadn't seen in over 20 years, heard about my case from a friend who worked at the hospital. She came to see me and said she couldn't let family go through this alone. She had a house with a spare room on the ground floor and offered to take me in. For the first time in years, I cried tears of relief. Clara's house was a sanctuary. The first days were strange. Any sudden noise made me flinch. She was an angel of patience, always moving slowly, speaking softly. She found me a physical therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, a firm but caring woman who was outraged by my story and vowed to help me get my independence back. The sessions were difficult. My body was locked in a state of constant defense. Dr. Sharma explained this was a normal trauma response. She was more than a therapist. She became my friend and confidante. She helped me understand that none of what happened was my fault. After about 3 months of therapy, something incredible happened. While reaching for an object, my left hand moved. Just a small twitch of the fingers, but we both started crying with joy. "See, Adelaide," she said, "your body is coming back to life." From that day, my progress accelerated. Movement returned to my fingers, then my wrist, my elbow. My leg started responding. Clara also took me to a psychologist, Dr. Evans. He helped me process the dual traumas, the stroke and the years of abuse. He taught me to name what Leo did: sexual violence, false imprisonment, abuse of a vulnerable person. It wasn't care. It wasn't love. Slowly, I began to shed the guilt that had weighed me down for so long. A few months later, Dr. Sharma said I was ready to try walking with a cane. I was terrified, but she said, "Trust me, Adelaide, you're ready." And I was. I took 3 trembling but firm steps on my own. Clara was there, sobbing with happiness. Walking on my own changed everything. I was no longer dependent. I couldn't go back to the factory. Dr. Evans suggested I find an activity that brought me joy. Clara reminded me of my old knack for plants and home remedies. She found a course on medicinal herbs taught by a lovely woman named Ms. Rose Dt. It was a wonderful discovery. Miss Rose said I had a gift. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt useful again. Meanwhile, the case against Leo proceeded. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. I thought justice had been served. But the American prison system can be a cruel joke. When I found out he was released for good behavior after only 3 years, I made a choice. Do you think I was wrong not to have reported him again when he tried to contact me? What would you have done? Because what happened next shows that sometimes life delivers its own form of justice. In the years that followed, I rebuilt my life. I opened a small natural product shop near Forsyth Park, selling the herbs, teas, and ointments I made myself. The business, thorn and thyme, thrived. I hired a young woman, Nina, to help me. I became a local expert, a source of comfort and natural healing for my community. My life found a peaceful rhythm. I had my morning coffee with Clara, walked to my shop, and spent my days helping people. Clara and I were like sisters. I even found love again. Mr. Arthur, a kind widower who bought lemon balm tea for his nerves, became my companion. He knew my story and treated me with the respect I thought I'd never feel again. Our relationship was built on trust and true affection. For 20 years, I lived in peace, happiness, and purpose. I even started an informal support group for women who had survived domestic violence, meeting in the back of my shop every Tuesday. My story was featured in the local paper. I had turned my tragedy into a new beginning. Then, on a Thursday morning last year, I heard a weak, trembling voice at my shop door. A voice that was horribly familiar. When I turned, I almost collapsed. It was Leo. But not the strong, domineering man I remember. Before me stood a broken man, thin, with sallow skin, leaning heavily on a cane. He looked like he had aged 30 years. He saw me and began to cry pathetically. "Mom," he choked out, "I'm very sick. I need your help. The doctors say I have multiple sclerosis. I'm going to be paralyzed if I don't get special care. Please don't abandon me." He stood there, trembling, expecting me to fall into the role of the foolish, all-forgiving mother. I looked at the man who had destroyed a decade of my life and felt a strange, icy calm. No anger, no fear, no pity. There he was, my tormentor, in the exact position I had once been, dependent, vulnerable, begging for help. He kept talking, trying to guilt me. "I know I did wrong, Mom. I know I hurt you, but I need you now. I have no one else." It was the same emotional manipulation, but it held no power over me anymore. I listened to his whole story. The diagnosis, losing his job, living in a squalid room, the fear of falling with no one to help. When he finished, I took a deep breath. "Now you know what it's like, don't you?" I said, my voice firm. "You know what it's like to be dependent on someone, to not be able to defend yourself, to have to trust that the person caring for you won't hurt you." His face changed as he understood. "Do you remember what you did to me for 10 years while I was paralyzed?" I continued, my voice steady. "Do you remember the abuse, the threats, how you turned my life into a living hell? Do you remember how I begged you to stop, and you told me I should be grateful?" He tried to interrupt. "Mom, I was young, I was immature." "You regret it because you need me now," I cut him off, looking straight into his eyes. "Not because you understand the harm you caused. Your regret is self-interest, not remorse." He played his last, most disgusting card. "Mom, I know you're a good person, a person of faith who forgives. You won't let your own son die of abandonment, will you? What will people think?" I laughed. "My son," I said, "died a long time ago. What stands before me is a stranger who once caused me great harm. And you know what people think of me today? They think I'm a brave woman who built a new life from the ashes. That's what matters. Now you will leave my store and never return. Go find a public nursing home, some charity that is paid to care for you. Because the care that comes from love, from family, you lost the right to that a long time ago." He staggered out of the store crying, but I felt not an ounce of pity. After he left, I locked the door, flipped the sign to closed, and sat down. I cried, not from sadness but from pure, absolute liberation. A massive weight had been lifted. I had finally looked my abuser in the eye and said, "No." I later heard he ended up in a state-run facility. I know his life there is not easy. It's exactly the fate he deserved. Today, at 72, I'm a complete and fulfilled woman. I have my shop, my family in Clara, my loving partner, Arthur, my health, and my purpose. My story proves that no matter how old you are or what you've endured, it's always possible to begin again. The key is to never give up, to seek help, and to never let those who hurt you continue to have power over your life. I'm Adelaide Thorne, and this is the story of how the worst trauma imaginable transformed me into the strongest woman I know. If you want more stories of overcoming adversity like mine, please subscribe to my channel. Here, we prove that it's never too late to start over, and that the best revenge is living well. Life teaches us that you reap what you sow, and those who sow evil will one day pay the price.